All right, so we will go ahead and get started. My name's Anya Rose. I'm with Hunger Free Colorado. Just a couple logistical housekeeping things before we jump in. This is part one of a three-part series on the Farm Bill, so hopefully you're all in the right place. And we are recording this call. We will make sure to send that out to everybody afterwards, along with all of the slides. So we're going to be sharing some slides with a lot of information. Don't worry about writing it all down. We will send them out to you all as a resource after. We do have quite a few folks on the line, which is really exciting. Thank you for being here. But we'll ask that you just keep lines muted, but please do actively use the chat. Absolutely want to keep hearing from everyone. And with that, I'm going to pass to Wendy.
Thanks so much, Anya. Hi, happy afternoon, everybody. My name is Wendy Peters-Muschetti, and I am with Nourish Colorado. And I am just going to kick us off today by reviewing. Recording's back on, great. I'm just going to get us started by reviewing a little bit of how we're going to spend the next 55 minutes together today. In what Anya mentioned, this is part one of a three-part series. Hopefully you all are registered for all three, and we'll talk a little bit more about what to expect later. So for today, in the 55 minutes we have left together today, as you already started doing, thank you so much. Our welcome and introductions are fairly limited to chat since there are so many of you, which is great on the line. So if you haven't already, please do chat in your name, where you're calling in from, if you're affiliated with an organization. And then once I'm done with this slide, we will open a poll. And so we do want to know a little bit more about who you are and where you're at and what's bringing you to the table. So we will do a little bit of polling with you today. And then I'll just do a little bit light touch on sort of the background and purpose and who's been involved and why are we doing this series of discussions. And then we're really going to get into the heart of this work, which is Farm Bill 101. So the bulk of today's call really is like, what is this massive piece of federal legislation that has so much to do with all of our lives? So some of my colleagues on the phone will do an incredible Farm Bill 101. And then we're going to close out really with an exercise with all of you around really talking through what are our shared values with this work. Understanding that with all of the interests just on this call alone, we will never collectively have the same priorities out of a farm bill or any legislative process, but we can maybe work together around some shared values and what are values that really bring us together into the table here today that we can kind of guide us as we do this work. And then obviously we'll close out with like, what's the next meeting and what are logistics? So let's move to the polling. So I think Anya's going to launch some polling. Please keep chatting in anything about you. Great. So the poll is open. It's in English and Spanish on the same poll. There are a series of questions. You do have to scroll through, excuse me, the entire poll and respond to the entire poll before you can hit submit. So please do scroll. The first question is just asking what region of Colorado are you in or living in or representing. And then we ask to describe your role in the food system that brings you here today. Understanding there are a lot more here, but we have to do closed-ended questions and polling. Hopefully these are broad enough. And then we have a question about what Farm Bill issues or just issues related to the food systems in general are you most excited to work on? And then we have a question about what is your experience with Farm Bill advocacy? So just trying to get kind of off the cuff sense of, maybe you've worked on 3 Farm Bill, maybe you've led all sorts of Farm Bill campaigns. Maybe this is the first time you've heard the term Farm Bill. There's probably a whole spectrum of people involved, which is great. That's exactly what we want. We just kind of want to get a sense of who's in the room. And then you could submit when you respond to all the questions. We have 75% participation so far. That's pretty good. I realize some of you may be calling in, and that's always hard. You can't really do the poll if you're just calling in today. But as Anya mentioned in the beginning, we are recording this, we're saving the chat, we will save the poll, and all of this we will share back out with you. We're pretty good, Anya, 32 out of 37 completing. I'm just wondering too, people who just joined, I think they can see the poll.
Wendy, I just closed it and shared the results out so that we can all see them. Is everyone
Perfect.
seeing that?
Oh, can everyone see it?
Can you see it, Wendy?
I can see it. So I'll tell you what it says. My only
I
option is to stop sharing, and I don't want to do that. So very high level, we are very represented in the Metro Denver region today, 64% of you from Metro Denver. In terms of describing your role in the food system, we have 85% of you. I'm a food systems advocate. That's great. That's all of us. We have a couple of farmers, we have some researchers, we had several interested residents, some participants in food assistance programs, and several agency partners. Great. In terms of which Farm Bill issues are you most excited to work on? Over half of you interested in working around SNAP, nutrition assistance, 79% of you talking about local and regional food systems, and about half of you are on land access and land equity issues, and several responses to all of them. Oh, 52% interested in healthy food incentives. I'm very biased. We're fans of those programs. The next question about experience with Farm Bill advocacy. 3 of you have worked on several Farm Bill campaigns. That is great. We are going to rely on you heavily in the months to come. Over about 61% of you have never engaged on a Farm Bill campaign, but excited to start. That's great. That's why we're all here together. That's wonderful. So thank you so much for that and for sharing more about you. Oh, there I hit. I don't know what's going on, Anya. I'm sorry I couldn't share that.
All right, perfect. I will stop sharing the results now, but we'll keep them saved. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Anya. So go ahead, next slide, please. It keeps popping up for me. The poll does not want to quit. All right, thanks for that, everybody. So just a little bit about sort of like who we are, who invited you to the table here today. There's been a fairly informal group of advocacy organizations that have come together to plan for and host this series of discussions with you all today. So those involve the Blueprint and Hunger. My colleague Joelle McClurg is on the line. Wave, Joelle. Anya Rose from Hunger Free Colorado. You've heard from her already. Erin Foster West with the National Young Farmers Coalition is on the line. I'm with Nourish Colorado. Megan Lovelace with the Blueprint and the Alliance to End Hunger. You're going to hear a lot of Farm Bill 101 from Megan today. And Effie Rourke with Feeding Colorado. Effie, I can't see you. Please wave. So far, those are some groups of us that have come together acknowledging that we all are going to be talking to our partners about the Farm Bill, and we all have very vested interest in the Farm Bill. And this is honestly, this coalition is very wide open. It's a question we know if you can chat it in now, you can follow up with any one of us, but if you or your organization are really actively mobilizing, planning for, talking to your legislators about the Farm Bill, we truly do welcome more people to be part of this planning process. A note I will say is that we are using the Blueprint and Hunger's Federal Policy Committee. They have these standing late Thursday afternoon meetings. We are using those meetings to be sort of the planning time for these sessions. So if that is something you're aware of, the Blueprint, you can reach out to Joelle on the line or chat in and we can get you more information about when kind of the planning for this is taking place. So broadly, we are a broad statewide coalition of residents, federal nutrition program operators, farm workers, farmers, nutrition program participants, and everyone. As I said in here, we're all eaters. So we all have a vested interest in the Farm Bill. And we're glad that you all could be here today. And thank you, Joelle. I see Joelle just chatted in his email. So you can reach out to Joelle about more information about the Blueprints Federal Policy Committee. So next slide, please. And why? So why did we think that we wanted to get here to do this together today? So Since I mentioned so many of our organizations will be communicating around the Farm Bill, we really wanted to pool our resources and our networks around the Farm Bill. I think today's conversation is a perfect example of not every single one of us needs to do a Farm Bill 101, right? Like, we don't need to have 20 different Farm Bill 101. So why don't we just do this together and really share this opportunity through all of our collective networks? And we will record this and share it even more broadly. A lot of us also have existing coalitions that we really want to shift focus to the Farm Bill. So for example, as for my own organization, the Food Bill Action Team, some of you are a part of, we're really going to shift focus. Like, the Food Bill Action Team is going to be all about the Farm Bill for the next many, many months. And as I already mentioned, the Blueprint Federal Policy Subcommittee structure was already in place. And for reasons that you will learn more about, are obvious, as like why there's issues in the Farm Bill so critical to that committee. And then together, we really want to come together and share what are really important and critical priorities for food system stakeholders in Colorado. And again, as I mentioned, as organizations, as individuals, we might never share the exact same very top priorities, but we can share what our priorities are with each other, and we can learn how to have each other's backs through this process, right? So my organization might have one priority, might be a little bit different than National Young Farmers Coalition, but we can be aware of those, and we can help communicate with each other when we're talking to legislators, so that we're really well aware of like what else is going on in Colorado and what is important to Coloradans. And then really importantly, we want to equip all of us on the phone here and more today to really have the tools to advocate for these issues that are really important to Coloradans with our federal delegation. So a culmination of this series, we will, as we move into the late June and July calls, we will focus more on how all of us can get prepared to host visits with our federal delegation and really talk to them about immerse them and what is really important for us around food systems issues, around nutrition assistance, around food and farming issues. So we're hoping everyone on this call feels confident enough to maybe have a site visit with their delegation while they're on recess in August. That's going to be a great goal for all of us. And so we can move to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it over to Megan to dive into Farm Bill 101.
Thanks, Wendy. And thank all of you for being here today. While this legislation can feel gigantic and terrifying, we're here today with you to break it down. So today we're going to talk about what the Farm Bill is, including a general description and the timeline, and what is included in the Farm Bill, the programs that are in there, and some programs you may be familiar with or work on that are not in the Farm Bill. We're going to go through the specific titles. Oftentimes you hear about Title IV, but the Farm Bill has many titles, and today we're going to touch a bit on each of them. We're not just going to talk about what the Farm Bill is, we're going to talk about some examples of how we've won in the past with the Farm Bill, using that piece of legislation to make sure that it's reaching folks where they're at and truly fulfilling need. We're going to get into the discussion around what our next steps are and where do we go from here. So buckle up, enjoy the ride. We're going to talk about the Farm Bill. Next slide. What is the Farm Bill? Well, it's a package of legislation that expires and is renewed every 5 years. It goes through an extensive process where it is proposed, debated, and passed by Congress, then sent to the president's desk for a signature. Each Farm Bill has a unique name, and the current Farm Bill is called the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2008. It was enacted into law in December of 2008 and expires in 2023. And you may ask, why are we starting now in 2022? That's a great question. And the answer is, well, we need a lot of time to argue with each other and come to consensus. And so this is the space we create to come to that consensus and bring our messages to the legislative body at the federal government. Next slide. The Farm Bill covers programs ranging from crop insurance for farmers, healthy food access for low-income families, beginning farmer training and support for sustainable farming practices, and more. Even though food is not in its name, it includes the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, known as TFAP, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, CSFP, and the Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations. You'll often hear that called FDIPR. Next slide. And now, how did we get to this space where we're talking about these policies? Well, there's a journey. It starts, of course, with elections and making sure that we're using the power of our vote to get elected officials into these roles in federal government, elected officials who believe in sustainable and equitable food systems, and then to encourage those elected officials to serve on committees that talk about the Farm Bill. That's the House and Senate Agriculture Committee. Now, authorization, how a bill becomes a law. Here we go. I hope your seatbelts are on, because this is where we really talk about how we get policy to become law. Really engaging with our legislators around what's good policy and how that affects people versus bad policy and how that may be affecting people adversely. We're asking sometimes for money, sometimes for changes in laws or programs, always remembering that we want to keep the folks using these programs centered in these policies, conversations, and outcomes. So when we talk about authorization, what we're talking about is how we get our dreams onto paper to become policy. Appropriations, this one's my favorite because I get to talk about money. Appropriations happens every year, and appropriations is the way that we fund the programs we love, and sometimes the programs we don't love. And while that happens every year, there will be appropriations conversations specifically related to the Farm Bill. So don't get lost. When you hear appropriations, think how the money travels. Implementation, ensuring programs and policies work as intended at the agencies and in the field. This is very important because you could have an amazing law, but if it's not regulated or implemented in a way that's going to work for the people using that program, it's not really working. So you'll hear a lot about implementation in these conversations. And that means how we're making sure that the laws that we've built together to really help folks are actually getting to the folks that need that help. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Erin to take a deep dive into some of the not so awesome history and the dreams we have for the future. Erin, take it away.
Thanks, Megan. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's important that we frame this conversation and talk a little bit about some of the harm that some of these programs have had before we dive into the different sections of the Farm Bill. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, as many of you may know, has a long history of discrimination against people of color, against women, against LGBTQ farmers and ranchers. And in fact, a number of class action lawsuits have been brought against the department by those groups. There's a class action lawsuit that was brought here from farmers and ranchers in Colorado and northern New Mexico from Hispanic and Latinx farmers and ranchers that was settled in the 90s. So it's discrimination that has happened against farmers across the country, but also has impacted many of our farmers here in the state in Colorado. We also know that by program design, many of the farm programs are designed for larger farms, for folks that have inherited land. So a good chunk of the funding, most of the funding that USDA has goes to white male farmers. It can be very hard for farmers of color to access those programs. It can be hard for women farmers to access those programs. And also farms that are smaller and more diversified have trouble accessing funding and getting support from USDA. So I think that this can make federal policy feel really disconnected for a lot of folks, and can make it really hard to get excited to work on these programs and work on federal policy when it has been responsible for racial violence, for theft, and disenfranchisement. But I think this is why it's so important that we're working on the Farm Bill and working together on the Farm Bill, because this is an opportunity for us to start to shift power, to influence these policy processes, and to interrupt this history of discrimination and oppression, so that we can equitably resource the next generation of farmers and other folks that are accessing these food programs. So I think it's important when we're doing this work that we're holding space for this history and this context of the Farm Bill programs, but also for this incredible opportunity that we have that comes around only every 5 years in the Farm Bill. Because the Farm Bill provides a lot of opportunity. A lot of funding in there goes to protect our land, our water, our air, provide support for rural economic development, funds programs like using SNAP at the farmers market. So we have an opportunity and the ability, I think, to work on redesigning these programs so they become more accessible and address some of these past harms. We also, I just quickly want to touch on that USDA, for the first time, is really setting themselves up to be accountable. They have a new equity plan, they have a new equity commission. So they're starting to create structures where we can hold them accountable to some of these past harm that they've caused through working on the Farm Bill. So I'm going to pass it back to Megan to talk a little bit about how do we start to do this? How do we start to influence this policy to disrupt the programs and past power structures?
Thanks, Erin. Let's talk a little bit about our timeline. The last Farm Bill was enacted in 2018, even though it was the 2017 Farm Bill. So just so y'all know, sometimes this takes a little bit longer than we may think. But moving forward, this year and next year, the House and Senate Agriculture Committees will have hearings and decide on what's called marker bills. So to clarify, there is a Senate Agriculture Committee and a House Agriculture Committee. And they like to make up their own versions of the Farm Bill. So sometimes you may hear that the committee said blank. Remember, it could be just one committee and they may not have consensus. So it's good to follow both committees. Those hearings are available online. We'll drop a link in the chat and it will also be in the follow-up email. So if you're having trouble sleeping at night and maybe need a little something to just, help your head hit the pillow, you can just listen to these Senate and House Agriculture Committee meetings. Unless you're a nerd like me, and I listen to all of them and actually gain quite a bit. They're dry. I won't lie to you about that. But it's a great way to know what the folks in those committees are thinking about and where they're at as we're designing our platform and thinking about how we're going to advocate for that very necessary systemic change to wipe away the pain of the racism and oppression that has been the Farm Bill in the past and even sometimes today. In 2023, those committees will have decided how they would like to see this new Farm Bill become reality. And so committees will go to what's called markups. Markups is when you decide where the money is going where. And remember, this is a very big piece of legislation. So there's lots of money and it goes in lots of different places. Again, there will be markups in the Senate side and markups on the House side as well. Another wonderful opportunity for people to have robust discussions around what it is that they believe should be in the Farm Bill. And all of us will be a part of those discussions with our legislators. In 2024, we're going to enact the Farm Bill and implement the Farm Bill. The president will have signed it and we'll be off on our way to a more equitable food system for all. And if not, then we'll keep working on this until it's done. Next slide. This makes it really easy to understand how the Farm Bill lives in the federal government. And so I spoke about those agriculture committees, one in the House and one in the Senate. They will complete their drafts, amendments, and votes. Again, you can watch those online. They're captivating. As you move down the line, the chambers together in the House of Representatives and the Senate will then debate, amend, and vote on the bills from the respective committees. Then the leaders from the House and Senate, including the committee chairs, will form a conference committee to combine the bills. After that, the full chambers, again, the House of Representatives and the Senate, will make floor votes on the combined and final bill passage. That's when the perfect farm bill that we've worked so hard for, that will have all the things we want in it, will go to the president's desk where he will sign it. Now, my caveat, of course, is we may not get everything we want or everything the way we want it. But now that you know the process, you know all the different ways that our voices can be heard, that we can rise up this coalition and other coalitions with the strength in numbers so that we really are a part of forming the Farm Bill. Next slide. And what's included in the Farm Bill? It's a big one. It includes things like commodity programs, crop insurance, conservation, agriculture credit, forestry programs, anti-hunger and nutrition assistance, rural development, research and extension, and trade. Next slide, please. What's out? And when we say out, we don't necessarily mean we're not thinking about these things. What we mean is they don't live in this particular piece of legislation outright. It doesn't mean that what happens in this piece of legislation doesn't then affect some of these other programs. That includes, when we say out, remember it's not in the Farm Bill, but it's related to farm and food worker rights and protections, public land grazing rights, irrigation water rights, FDA food safety, renewable fuel standards, tax issues, school meals and WIC, which stands for Women, Infants, and Children, and farm to school. You'll see the sort of there because that one's kind of straddling a little bit in, a little bit out, it can't decide, kind of like the Older Americans Act, and then the Child Nutrition Reauthorization also straddling some things that all of you may be familiar with. And when you ask, where are these programs located? Sometimes it's in those places. Sometimes it's in the Department of Interior. Just remember that all of us on the call today, myself, Anya, Wendy, Aaron, Joelle, Effie, we're happy to answer questions, either in the chat or offline, to help all of you better understand exactly where these things do live and how you can affect change across the board. Next slide. Here we go. It's the pie chart. Everybody talks about the pie. And when you hear folks talking about this pie, which, looks so delicious because so much of it is green, you may hear folks often saying, so much of the Farm Bill lives in nutrition. To which I say, of course, because all of us eat. But when people argue about money, they often use this to argue about who is getting what. You can see it here. Crop insurance, that's a doozy. Our nutrition programs, feeding people all over the United States and across the world every day. Commodity programs, those are our big five. Peanuts, soy, corn, wheat, beets. Did I miss, Erin? That's them. Conservation. And then in this little sliver over here, this little black sliver, you'll find all the other bits which are in the titles, which we're about to go through the Farm Bill titles. You may be surprised to know how much of what affects you in your life every day is right here in this pie. Next slide. Erin, I'm going to pass this one over to you for the first of our titles.
Thanks, Megan. We're going to talk a little bit about the titles in the Farm Bill. A title is basically a section of the Farm Bill that groups some like programs together. So that's just the language that Congress used, so that's what we'll use. But basically, these are just groupings of similar programs within these titles. There's about over a dozen titles and many programs that are covered. So we won't have time to talk about every single program within a title today, just to give you sort of a basic overview of what are held within these different sections. So we'll start with Title I, which is the commodity programs. These programs provide price and income support for farmers who are raising some widely produced and traded non-perishable crops. Megan mentioned those. Things like corn, soybeans, wheat, rice, dairy and sugar are included in there as well. This title also includes some disaster assistance, so support for farmers who are experiencing drought, floods, freezes, hail, things like that. These disaster programs are also in Title I. We've got Title II, that is the conservation title. That includes programs that help farmers and ranchers implement natural resource conservation efforts on their working lands like pasture or cropland. So this could help pay for cover crops. It can help pay for transitioning to organic production. It can pay for updating your irrigation to make it more efficient. It also includes some easement programs in there, so some land protection for folks that would want to put their land under an easement. All right, then we have Title III. This is the trade title. So this covers some food export subsidy programs and international food aid programs. And then we have Title IV. This is the, we've got the nutrition title. I was gonna skip that one and go to credit, but we've got nutrition. Megan touched on this earlier too. This is the SNAP program, our TFAP program for food banks, the food distribution program on Indian reservations. Some of these programs are quite a mouthful. So you'll see a lot of these acronyms again and probably hear a lot of these acronyms again throughout the conversation. All right, so then we have Title V, which is the credit title. This covers farm loan programs that can help farmers access financial credit. So if they need some credit to sustain their farming operation or start a farming operation, this could include like a loan to purchase seed and their operating costs for the year. It can also provide loans for purchasing land or providing down payment on land. So all those loan programs are in the credit title. And then last here, we've got the rural development title. So this covers programs that help foster rural economic growth and opportunity through rural businesses, community development. That includes farm businesses like the Value Added Producer Grant, which can support farmers to process some of their products so they get a higher price for their products. It also covers some rural housing and infrastructure like rural electric and rural water infrastructure. And I'll pass it back to Megan to cover the rest of the titles.
Thanks, Erin. Can you believe there are this many titles in the Farm Bill? No wonder it's confusing. It's almost like that's on purpose. I'm very excited to tell you about Title VII, Research, Extension, and Related Matters. Don't forget, this is the title that includes HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. Who knew that the funding for amazing institutions like HBCUs is embedded in the Farm Bill? Title VIII, Forestry. Thank goodness for our Forest Service here in Colorado, really keeping us safe from those wildfires. Title IX, Energy. This encourages the development of farm and community renewable energy systems through various programs, including grants and loans, as we encourage our farmers to diversify and they look at things like solar. They may look here for support. Title X, Horticulture. This supports the production of specialty crops, certified organic foods, and locally produced foods. Authorizes establishing a regulatory framework for the cultivation of industrial hemp, which was passed in the last Farm Bill, and why you've seen such a robust growth in that industry since 2018. Title 11, Crop Insurance, enhances risk management through the permanently authorized federal crop insurance program. It's a way for farmers to know that if they're making a risky business decision, that there's a little bit of a cushion there. And for our last title, Miscellaneous, this is the place where we stuff everything that we didn't know where else to put it that lives in the Farm Bill. Also the black line. And what you'll see in there is actually so much important stuff that just didn't find another home. So as we look through all these titles, remember all of them are important. And while we know nutrition may rise to the top in this conversation, think about our neighbors, where the other titles really rise to the top for them. And know that even if it doesn't live in this conversation, we're going to find a place for you to push in where you believe, even if it isn't in the Farm Bill discussion. It doesn't mean we can't connect you with the right resources to connect with folks working on those other titles, even if it's not us. Next slide. All right, we're going to talk about a couple examples of how our advocacy has changed the landscape through positive ways with the Farm Bill. I'm going to hand it over to Erin to talk about the Farmer and Rancher Stress Assistance Network.
Thanks, Megan. So this was one new program that we saw in the 2018 Farm Bill, which was the last Farm Bill, the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network program. This was a brand new program. A group of farm advocates came together to pass this program. And this is a program that connects farmers and farm workers in rural communities with mental health resources. Before the last Farm Bill, there was some research and awareness came out around mental health crisis in our farming communities with higher rates of suicide, higher rates of experiencing stress and not having access to resources, especially in rural communities. So this program was passed to deliver more of those resources to the agricultural community. Had not been in a Farm Bill before, had never been funded before. So a group of farmer advocates came together. The National Farmers Union was a really big advocate in making this program happen and be included in the last Farm Bill. And we've seen now there's regional networks across the country to develop networks of resource providers, mental health experts that can connect with farmers and farm workers and other folks in rural communities that need access to those services. So it's had a huge impact. We work a lot with this program and connect the farmers and ranchers that I work with people that are providing services through this program. So it has really been a big success. And we were happy to see it in the last Farm Bill and hope it continues in this upcoming Farm Bill. And I'll pass it back to Megan for one other example of what happened in the last Farm Bill.
Thanks, Erin. And thank you, Erin, for your work on that piece of legislation. It's helping so many people. Protecting SNAP, again, that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And if you remember the delicious pie, it's the green part, also the largest part. Oftentimes what we find, and what you may find this time around as well, is SNAP is under attack, as they say, because so much of the pie goes to SNAP. And why? While it may seem a no-brainer for us, it's not always for the committees. And so, every Farm Bill cycle, we work hard to remind our leadership, our legislators, our committee chairs, how important the SNAP program is for keeping our communities healthy, thriving, and fed. And while we know SNAP's not perfect, and we'll push as much as we can to make the program as equitable as possible, sometimes it means just making sure the funding stays at what it is today. That doesn't sound amazing, but as you come along with us, what you'll find is that protecting SNAP may take a lot of your time, reminding folks how important the program is and how all the programs in the nutrition title serve very specific purposes, and that without them, people go hungry, people become unhealthy. So please join us in the fight to protect SNAP. Keep it funded at the level it's funded. You may hear the word ABOD and say, what does that mean? Able bodies without dependence, often used to say, why don't people get back to work? Don't let your blood boil. Just remind them that everybody eats and everybody deserves to eat. So we invite you to help us protect SNAP this session and until we have a Farm Bill signed. Next slide. And I think that's Anya or Joelle.
Yeah, so we're actually going to come back to this one at the end. Thank you so much, Megan and Erin. We know that was a lot of background information, so we'll pause for a couple minutes and open it up for some questions that we will do our best to answer before moving into a little exercise to wrap up. So any questions, feel free to raise your hand or pop it in the chat.
Anya, I have a quick one. Since it's 12:47, we're running a tiny bit behind schedule. Is it okay if we jump into the Jamboard exercise for shared values to address this time?
Sure.
And address questions in the chat as they come up?
Yes, we can absolutely do that.
Awesome. Thanks for
So I will pass to you and kick it off while I'll start the screen.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Anya. Yeah, if you have other questions, y'all, please don't hesitate to drop them into the chat and one of the members of the team will address them and answer them accordingly. Thank you. There have been really good questions in the chat already. So what I want to do is take us through a shared exercise where we identify values for this coalition. You know, we're all going to have sort of different specific priorities based on our organizations and the needs of our community. Feeding Colorado is going to focus on charitable food and the Emergency Food Assistance Program. Nourish focuses on healthy food incentives. Young Farmers Coalition obviously focuses on the proliferation of resources for young or beginning farmers in the space. So there's going to be individual experts focusing on each kind of provision of the Farm Bill. But what is it that unites us and links us all together? What are the values for each and every one of us? So Anya is going to drop a link to the Jamboard in the chat. Please and thank you, Anya. And basically, we're going to collectively come together and fill in some shared values so that we can all get a sense of what's bringing us all together and what we can collectively focus on together in regards to themes collectively. I see a ton of people jumping in. That's wonderful. Okay, so there are 7 identical slides. You'll see at the very top, there's a little arrow to the right. You can click that, or you can use the arrows on your computer as well. And you're going to go to any slide, just pick your favorite number between 1 and 7. It does not matter. And the prompt is, we envision a farm bill that ... Or it could even be broader than that. I encourage you to even think broader if you like as well. What's your ideal food and farm system in your community, right? So imagine that prompt. Think about what that means for you for a few moments and identify your top 2 or 3 priorities that you feel like are really, really important when we're thinking about food and farm systems or the Farm Bill specifically. When you have your few priorities, you're going to go over and click on the little notepad in the left menu. It's going to pop up on you. Do you mind just clicking it so folks can see, please? Brilliant. You pick a color up at the top, type in your vision or value, and then you can leave your name if you want. You don't have to. You can remain anonymous. That's perfectly fine. Click save, and then there you can click off the box and drag it wherever you want. So just please go ahead and take those few minutes now, fill in a few of your top priorities or themes that draw us all together, really specific to your community. And what we'll do is I will go through all of the themes and ideas, and I will kind of collect and distill them down into our top collected recurring sort of visions. And then we will bring those back at our next meeting and kind of refine them into these shared values for this group. So that's kind of the goal here, is the uniting umbrella for all of us. What are the really important ideas that are kind of trickling to the top? So we have a few minutes. If you would please take about 4 or 5 minutes and do that now, that would be great. Again, any slide is perfect. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And Anya's going to share a little music to kind of get just, those creative juices flowing while we do it.
One really quick note, thank you, Joelle. We are going to leave this open too. If you don't, if you want some time to like mull over it, process, or think of things a few days from now, that's wonderful. We're going to leave this open well into June, until June 21st. So we'll send it out in the follow-up too, so that you can keep adding as ideas come up. And then I will be quiet, and hopefully you'll hear music soon.
Thank you so much, everyone. Continue to add in as you like. You can sit and chew on it a little bit longer, and we will definitely distill all these messages together. So grateful for you. Thank you. Anya?
All right, thank you, everybody. So all that remains is a quick wrap up and talking through next steps. So as we mentioned at the beginning, we will send a follow-up email to all of you, and that will include a recording and the slides, a link to the Jamboard so that you all can continue adding to that. We're going to try to leave that open until June 21st, and then that'll give us, about a week to synthesize it and bring a document back to you all for our next meeting, which is June 29th. We also have a form that we'll share in the chat where you can share more with us about how you'd like to get involved. So we ask everyone, please fill that out. That'll help us communicate with you all, and we'll get more information about who wants to join the coalition. So I just put that in the chat, but we will also send that in the follow-up email. And then we'll also include more information on some of the questions you all asked and things like how to get updates on when to tune into Farm Bill hearings and things like that. So keep an eye out for that in the next week or so. It'll be full of links and whatnot. So again, please keep adding to the Jamboard or contact one of us, and we're happy to add to it for you. Also complete that form. And then our next meeting is June 29th at the same time on the same Zoom line. So from 12 to 1. And we'll be digging a little bit more into the advocacy pieces and some priorities, and then we'll revisit these values with you all. And then the final meeting in this series is July 13th. And that will be from 12 to 1, again, on the Zoom line. So same time. Next one is in about a month, and then 2 weeks after that, we'll hopefully see you all again. And if you're interested in participating in the planning or getting more involved in the coalition, we would absolutely love to have you join our Blueprint to End Hunger Federal Policy Committee meetings. Those are every other Thursday afternoon. And you are all welcome. The best way to get looped into those is to email Joelle, which is in the chat. And then we can all just be, thinking about how we get ready to advocate and mobilize around this. We're all really grateful that you're on the line with us and are looking forward to working with you all and building this coalition over this summer and well into the next year, because as Megan showed us, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And we're looking forward to working with you all.
And Anya, I'm just going to jump into to do a little teaser for the next calls. We will have some special guests. We will have staff from Senator Bennett's office, as well as Representative Crow's office on the next call, and then staff from Senator Hickenlooper's office, either on the next call or the one in July, so that we can kind of hear direct from the source how we do these things. How do we speak to these offices? How do we get them involved? What sort of compelling ways to work with them? So more to come. And ditto to everything you said, Anya. Thank you all so much.
Okay, thank you all. We will be in touch and hope to see you June 29th or sooner if you want to join those Blueprint calls.